Hello and welcome. You're watching this week a weekly news review that brings you engaging stories on local political and social affairs. I'm Batsir Namshir. For this week we have Salkhit silver deposit resources increased by 60%. Normal scheduled flight will resume starting on May the 1st. Mongolia's economic growth is expected to recover gradually in 2021 to 4.8%. For other stories, stay tuned. The Salkhit silver deposit set in motion the drafting of amendments to the state treasury law in 2020. Irden Silver Resource LLC owns the license to the deposit, and the company has reported that the deposit resources have increased by 60% as a result of recent exploration.
The Salkhit silver deposit is known the country's first mining project to be transferred to state ownership and managed by Mongolian engineers through private sector management. The deposit was originally assessed to have a reserve of 2.3 million tons of ore. The reserve has now been assessed at 3.2 million tons of ore, marking a 60% increase. In 2020, the government put the Salkhit silver deposit's resources in motion and cancelled pension loan debt. This May, the government plans to redistribute welfare payments to seniors who did not have pension loan debt when loan forgiveness was applied. The deposit covers a total area of 2,887 hectares. The plant, which operates 24 hours a day, all year round, has the capacity to process 1,000 tons of ore per day and to produce 30 to 40 tons of concentrate. 1 ton of concentrate can contain about 1 kilogram of silver, 3 grams of gold, and more than 1 kilogram of copper and zinc. Irden Silver Resource, which owns the license to mine the Salkhit silver deposit, reported that the deposit's remaining natural resources can be used for at least another 5 years.
Currently, there are 862 tons of silver resources and 1.5 tons of gold. Mining operations are continuing. Also, we are planning to complete a site perspective study. This deposit isn't that large, but it's very resource-rich. Our project holds the promise of 750 billion Mongolian tugrks in the net profits.
It's been a year since the Salkhit silver deposit has entered into regular mining operations, but industry analysts say it has already been profitable. The project is the first to be led by Mongolian engineers without foreign collaboration. The project is now providing employment to over 350 Mongolian engineers.
You're watching us on MNB World. Thank you for staying with us. Analysts say the change in the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic caused change in housing prices. They have been reducing in previous years, but today they are increasing.
Irden's family recently got their own apartment. They chose the most valuable location in the city and bought it at a relatively high price compared to the current average. Because housing, he said, is an important choice that doesn't happen very often in his life.
For middle-class people like us, we buy a home not more than 3 times in a lifetime. It's not like everyday bread or buying a car.
Housing prices, which are growing at 8 to 10% a year, have risen even during the pandemic. The price of a new apartment was 2,400,000 Mongolian tugruks in March last year, but today it is 2,472,000 Mongolian tugruks.
In March, housing prices increased to 2,570,000, or by about 120,000. This growth will continue. In particular, experts say that once the price of materials have risen, it's clear that construction prices will rise in the future.
The housing price index rose 9.4% in February compared to a month earlier. This growth is expected to continue. This is because the mortgage interest rate has dropped to 6%, depending on the fact that the supply of mortgage loans is not less than 1 trillion Mongolian tugruks. Over the next year, nominal housing prices will increase by 10 to 15% and real housing prices by 5 to 7%. There's also a long-term increase due to rising costs of construction materials.
There's no way we can control the price of housing and materials. Due to this, there is no possibility of reducing the price as all the imported rebar and other materials have increased in price. Even domestically produced bricks and cement have risen in price by about 10%. It's impossible to reduce housing prices in the future.
Our country has been growing steadily since October 2020, when mortgage interest rates fell from 8% to 6%. Economists also warn that the housing bubble could hurt the economy in the future.
The date of Mongolia's presidential election was announced. The voting for the sixth president will take place on June the 9th. Starting from Friday, political parties nominate their presidential candidates. On May the 24th, the name of the candidates will be announced.
The presidential election of 2021 will be organized under the newly approved law by the government. As directed by the law, a presidential candidate must be a natural-born citizen of Mongolia, a resident for at least 5 years, and 50 years of age or older. The nomination for presidential candidates is starting today and will continue until May 2nd. After revising the registration documents, the General Election Commission will announce the candidates for Mongolia's president on May 24th. The election campaign will also start on that day and will continue for 15 days. On June 9th, Wednesday, polling stations will be open from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. According to the new law, the ballot papers will be counted by hand when the voting has finished. Another highlight for this year is that Mongolian citizens living in foreign nations are allowed to participate in the voting for president. The presidential election of 2021 is the 8th election since 1993. Mongolia will choose its sixth president on June 9th.
On Monday, April the 26th, Prime Minister Oyun Irdeng held an official meeting with Ambassador of India to Mongolia, Mr. MP Singh. The two countries discussed their joint efforts to overcome the pandemic. The Mongolian government expressed its solidarity with India for overcoming this hard time.
During the meeting, the Prime Minister expressed his concern about the critical pandemic situation in India, as well as for the many lives lost. He noted that Mongolia is supporting India and handed over a letter written to the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. Prime Minister Oyun Irdeng also expressed his gratitude towards the Indian government for delivering the first 150,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines to Mongolia by means of a grant. He also noted that the Aid for India movement has already underway among the public. Through this meeting, Mongolia showed its warm support to India and marked the two countries' harmonious relationship in past 66 years. Indian Ambassador Mr. Singh thanked the Mongolian government and appreciated the efforts of Mongolians who are standing with India during this struggle. The two sides agreed upon proceeding with the projects implemented within the strategic partnership, including the building of an oil refinery and the transportation of coal.
Mongolia is opening its air border starting from May the 1st. Normal scheduled flights will resume. Mongolia is estimated to welcome around 3,000 passengers a month based on the availability of COVID-19 isolation houses.
Starting from May 1st, chartered flights are shifting into scheduled flights. The Civil Aviation Authority stated that now it will require fewer materials for upcoming Mongolian citizens, as the process was troublesome during the repatriation flights. Now passengers can directly order their tickets from ticketing offices. Once passengers arrive in Mongolia, they will be isolated for a week for coronavirus testing. A full payment for an isolation house is required before ordering the ticket. The accommodation price is 50,000 Mongolian tugruks per day.
The number of scheduled flights will be set in accordance with the availability of isolation houses. The total price for an isolation home is 360,000 Mongolian tugruks for a week. There are also some expensive hotels with various prices. Passengers have the option to stay in those hotels.
According to the calculation of Civil Aviation Authority, Mongolia would be able to receive about 400,000 tourists in 2021 if the pandemic is under control.
On April the 27th, the European Union and World Health Organization donated essential equipment and tools to the Ministry of Health to support Mongolia's COVID-19 response. The event was held as part of the Mongolia COVID-19 Crisis Response Project.
The handover ceremony took place at the Ministry of Health and was attended by Health Minister Mr. Ingpolt, the head of the European Union delegation to Mongolia, Mr. Marco Ferrer, and the WHO representative to Mongolia, Mr. Sergei Diorditsa. This supply will help Mongolia to reduce the current impacts of the COVID-19 crisis and enhance the national health system in the medium and long term. It is part of the project Mongolia COVID-19 Crisis Response, funded by the European Union and WHO. The European Union is providing support of 1 million euros, and WHO is providing a further 62,000 euros, along with technical guidance to Mongolia's health sector. The project is being implemented by World Health Organization Mongolia in collaboration with the Ministry of Health over a 3-year period, starting from October 2020. The project focuses on 3 specific areas, which are early detection control of COVID-19, improving the laboratory capacity, and adequate healthcare services during widespread community transmission and lockdown. Mongolia has been experiencing a sudden surge in COVID-19 cases since March 2021. In response to community transmission, the Ministry of Health has revised the national response strategy. 9 district health centers will conduct response measures, including early detection, contact tracing, isolation, quarantine, testing, monitoring of vulnerable high-risk populations, and vaccination. In line with the project's first objective, the necessary medical equipment and tools were delivered to the Ministry of Health.
In the first quarter of 2021, Mongolia exported 13.7 tons of meat. This amount is 4 times less compared to the same period last year, right before the pandemic began.
Among the total amount of meat exported, 51% is goat meat, 20% is horse meat, and another 20% is mutton, and 10% is beef. Since the beginning of 2021, 70% of total exported meat was heat-treated meat. Experts say domestic meat resources have been prepared enough for this year. Therefore, there won't be any difficulty in increasing the amount of meat to be exported. The Ministry of Food, Agriculture and Light Industry says it has planned to sell abroad about 30,000 tons of meat this year.
The peak export season is from September to December. At that time, we plan to increase our exports by considering last year's risks and issues.
The average price of 1 kilogram of meat is about 20,000 Mongolian tugruks on the foreign market. At the southern border with China, 1 truck loaded with meat brings a profit equal to 4 trucks loaded with coal. In other words, meat exports are highly beneficial to the Mongolian economy.
When it comes to profit, meat is just as important as coal. The profit from meat exports also benefits herders' income. Another advantage is that mainly lean meat is used for the heat treatment. Therefore, livestock isn't required to be fat and bulky.
Last year, Mongolia sold 38.3 thousand tons of meat to foreign markets, generating $92 million of revenue. In the first quarter of 2021, Mongolia exported around 14 tons of meat. Until the end of 2021, 20 more tons of meat is planned to be exported to the international market.
Mongolian peacekeepers acted quickly to protect humanitarian workers who were attacked by angry youths during demonstration in the remote area of Jamjiang in South Sudan. The United Nations mission in South Sudan shared the good news on their website.
On Saturday morning, approximately 50 youth began a violent demonstration about the hiring of workers from outside by a non-governmental organization based in Jamjiang. They stormed the organization's compound and several staff were injured. As soon as reports of the attack were received, Mongolian troops serving with the United Nations peacekeeping mission in nearby deployed a quick reaction force to protect the humanitarian workers. The peacekeeping team later reinforced their presence with additional troops and are continuing to patrol the area to provide safety and security for humanitarian partners who are working to support communities in desperate need of assistance. Over the past few years, United Nations mission in South Sudan has been engaging with the authorities in many parts of the country, including the Unity region, to deal with increasing demands from local populations that agencies should only hire workers from particular ethnic backgrounds. South Sudan is facing a serious youth unemployment problem due to the dire economic situation.
On Wednesday, the Asian Development Bank introduced its annual economic report online. According to their publication, Asian Development Outlook 2021, Mongolia's economic growth is expected to recover gradually in 2021 to 4.8%.
A new report by the Asian Development Bank says Mongolia's economic growth is expected to recover gradually in 2021 through its trade and higher export volume, and it will accelerate in 2022 when the pandemic eases off and the global economy recovers. As reported by the recent Asian Development Outlook 2021, Mongolia's economic growth will recover to 4.8% in 2021 compared to the 5.3% contraction seen in 2020. In 2022, ADB forecasts 5.7% growth, boosted by domestic demand, investment, increased private credit, and the full recovery across economic sectors. During the online presentation, ADB Country Director for Mongolia, Mr. Tavit Ramachandran, briefly introduced the current economic situation in Asia.
The economic recovery paths in developing Asia are diverging. But beneath it all, I think there is a clear demonstration of the underlying resilience of the region. Some economies, some countries are returning to normal and are seeing growth boosted primarily by exports and a quick turnaround of the manufacturing sector, while others are still contending with domestic outbreak, containments, local restrictions and lockdowns. COVID-19 cases in the region are picking up again since March this year, and we have seen the same trend here in Mongolia. After a 0.2% regional contraction in 2020, progress on vaccination rollouts and recovering global demand will foster a 7.3% economic recovery in developing Asia for 2021. This will be led primarily by the People's Republic of China and to a lesser extent by India. Developing Asia's growth is expected to moderate to 5.3% in 2022.
The ADB report also notes that Mongolia's growth prospects in 2021 to 2022 will largely depend on the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, the economic recovery in neighboring China, the rebounding of commodity exports, the overall investment climate, and private sector credit growth. Until the vaccination target of 60% of the population is achieved, concerns over public health will continue to dampen domestic demand and business confidence, which result in an uneven recovery outside of the mining sector. However, business sentiment and economic prospects will be better in 2022 as COVID-19 concerns ease. Average inflation will accelerate to 6.9% in 2021 and 8.5% in 2022, which is rising above the 6% medium-term inflation target as the economy and demand recover, fuel prices increase, and exchange rate effects pass through to prices for imported goods.
Well, that's all for this week. Thank you for being with us on MNB World. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.